Welcome to MyLife Essays, Applied episode 157. Beginning with blessings for Chag Pesach Kosher v'Sameach, as we are now within the 2 weeks before Pesach. It's actually a week and a day. And 30 days before Pesach, we already begin to wish that, and we begin to learn Hilchos HaChag, the laws of the holiday. And definitely, according to all opinions, 2 weeks before. And of course, for us in this generation, this is also the week of the Rebbe's 115th birthday, Alef Nisan, on Friday, as well as leading into Shabbos Hagadol. And it's the same kviz, the same schedule as it was when the Rebbe was born in Tov Reish Samach Beis in the year 1902. It was on a Friday. And there's a story, one of the Rebbe's assistants tells that once the Rebbe was, I don't know if it was a Friday, but the Rebbe was talking about how busy he was and how he was not catching up with his workload and so on. And he said, what can I do? I was born on a Friday. And Freitag is alles gejogt mit kemlish verendigt to mis allemal unter das dechik. What could you do? You're born on Friday, and Friday you're always rushing, never finished, and always under pressure. This is the Rebbe's own words about himself. So you could see the birth of a person is connected to the day, and since this year the schedule is the same, it's worthy to remember that. Now, of course, the positive side of that is that the Rebbe was a living model of what it means to be a busy person, not just a busy person, but constantly growing and never satisfied. The famous classic psyche when the Rebbe turned 70 years old in 1972, Tov Lamed Beis. So the Rebbe then said that he's getting letters about retiring, how much he's accomplished, now it's time to slow down. And the Rebbe said, you don't measure the age of a person by their passport, you measure their age by their activities and their accomplishments. And Adam la'amal yavolah, a person was created to toil. And the Rebbe actually then went into a whole elaborate discussion, classic Rebbe, in taking a so-called challenge and turning it into one of the big chidushim of the Rebbe and Chassidus in general, the power of Aveda b'kei chasmi, the power of effort. And the sichos already printed in Chelik Tezvov based on those Yud Alef Nisan Fabrengen. And as well as the Michtav Kloli, the letter that the Rebbe gave out then for Pesach, the main chidush being, the Rebbe asked the question, why is it taka we find that people have more satisfaction when they work for something, when they get it as a gift? In the language of Chazal, Adam reitza b'kav shalei, yesa mitisha kav mishal chavere. A person desires more of one measure of their own than 9 measures that are given as a gift. The Yerushalmi uses the expression nemed dechsufa, bread of shame when you get a gift. And you see a person, when he earns his own, he will make sure that he keeps it. When he gets it as a gift, even though you can buy more with $9 than with $1, with $9,000 more than $1,000, but when it's your own, there's a certain deeper appreciation. So the Rebbe asked the question, why is it taka that way? Why did the Eibishter not make that you could receive a gift and also feel proud and not be ashamed? And the Rebbe's answer, simple but profound, was because the Eibishter wanted a shutaf l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'ma'aseh bereishis. He wanted us to be his partners. And ma'avichem bara elam is kach. Just as God creates the world, he wants us to be creators. Should we get satisfaction from being receivers, we would never have the ability to create, to initiate, to be proactive, which is such a fundamental principle in the Rebbe's entire Nesius. And now when we honor and celebrate the 115th birthday, as the Rebbe would always bring by the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab, that the years continue on, and which is why we continue saying the kapitel every year, because the neshama continues to grow, Mechayel al Choyel, just in a different plane. So the growth and that effort that the Rebbe embodied and personified, the idea of Adam Lomi Yavala, the idea that we have to continuously go and grow, is a message to each of us as being shluchim, the Rebbe's ambassadors and agents in this world. And that's number one lesson. Another lesson, when we talk about Yud Alef Nisan, we'll talk about a few things about the Rebbe, being that it's appropriate that this special edition of Yud Alef Nisan should be addressing that, is a few questions I'll talk about in a moment, but I want to go over to Shabbos Hagadol for a moment. And being that the Rebbe was born on Friday, so of course it went right into Shabbos Hagadol, Yud Alef Nisan. That kvias in that year, like this year's Yud Beis Nisan, would be Shabbos Hagadol. Why is it called Shabbos Hagadol? So Mefarshim, the Tur, Teisvis, and all the Rishonim and the Poskim talk about different reasons. And yet the Alter Rebbe chooses one of the reasons, and the reason of the Makim Mitzrayim b'Pchereyim, because on that Shabbos, when the Pcherim, the firstborn, heard of what's going to be happening, they went to war, civil war against the Mitzrayim, and they calls that a Nez Gadol. And that's why, even though it was connected to a particular day, but we honor it on Shabbos, as he explains there in Shulchan Aruch. And the Rebbe, many sikhs out why the Alter Rebbe chose this reason. The Tur, for example, gives a different reason. He says a different great miracle happened. That when the Mitzrayim saw that they were going to bring a lamb, Paschal lamb, the lamb offering, the Korban Pesach, and a lamb was their deity. So of course that was the most for them the most religious possible thing. So they wanted to stop it. The miracle happened that they could not stop the Jews, even though they were technically still their slaves, from bringing the offering. Why Dafka is this Nezgod? Why the Alter Rebbe choose this reason? Of course, it's not his own. It's taken from Teshuva and from other places that this reason is cited. So the Rebbe says, because the greatest miracle of all is when darkness fights darkness. It's one thing, you have miracles, you have makis, you have many things that happen during Mitzrayim and during Yitzis Mitzrayim. But when you have that the enemy itself turns on itself, then you know you've achieved a real powerful success, because that's a transformation from within, which provides us a tremendous lesson in Chassidus Applied. And to be brief, taken from the Rebbe's ideas, the Alef Nisan ideas, in addition to what I mentioned before, the idea of his hapche chashechel nehera. It's not just enough to repel darkness, to avoid it, but ultimately to transform it. Obviously, with the right conditions, the right circumstances. And in healing, that's the ultimate healing. Famous analogy that the Alter Rebbe gave, there are two ways to stop a thief from being a thief. One is you catch him and put him in prison. And the other way is you rehabilitate him. Now, when you put him in prison, he can't steal. So the problem you've solved, those symptoms. But you haven't changed the thief. The thief is still a thief. When you rehabilitate him, that's called hishapcha, a transformation. And you find in the Rebbe's Nesius, the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe's approach to things, that every negative needs to be turned out into a positive. Every liability into an asset. And of course, in psychological terms and any type of application to our personal lives, it's a tremendous lesson. Now, obviously, it's stages. First, you have to obviously get out of the line of fire and stop the bleeding. But then comes a point where something you've learned due to your dark experiences, there has to be lamakim mitzrayim b'pchereim, your knowledge, your awareness, your acute understanding of a situation that others were not placed in that situation offers a tremendous opportunity, because you can teach and you can help others avoid and prevent them from getting into that type of dark place. And that's what happens when someone goes through that darker place, which of course is a big message in Yitzis Mitzrayim in general, on Pesach, but particularly connected to Shabbos Hagadol and connecting it to your Alef Nisan. As you see, a recurrent theme in the Rebbe's leadership. With that, let's go to a few questions regarding Rebbe, your Alef Nisan questions. And I will also say now, I should have maybe said at the outset, but the excitement of that we will be announcing in this program the winners of the third annual MyLife Chassidus Applied Essay Contest. It was a difficult journey and challenge, because very many essays came in, very good essays, and the judges, of course, first filtered it down, and I will go through the finalists and then finally to the top 3 winners. So we'll be counting down a little later in the program. So stay tuned for that. So now, regarding Alef Nisan, before I go into details, I want to just say that being that this is the 3rd year we're doing MyLife Chassidus Applied, I've already discussed Alef Nisan in previous episodes, so see this as cross-referencing to episodes 62 and 112. Regarding Shabbos Hagadol, I discussed it in episode 111, which would be essentially a year ago. So whatever we discuss here is complements and is complemented by those previous episodes. Okay, question. How can I make this Yud Alef Nisan a meaningful one? I don't want it to be just another year passing. So what specific lessons and inspiration can I draw from this day? Okay, excellent question and relevant question to all of us. I'll share a little insider story. When the Rebbe turned 80, Tavshin Membeis, so months before that, being that I had the schus and merit to work in the sichos of the Rebbe, and we wanted to do something special for Yud Alef Nisan. So around Chanukah time, which is uncharacteristic, yes, several months earlier, maybe even earlier than Chanukah, I don't remember exactly, I wrote into the Rebbe at Settle a note saying that we're suggesting, we have a thought that for Yud Alef Nisan, Shnas Hashmenim, that we should publish all the Maimorim that the Rebbe said in connection with Yud Aleph Nisan. So we have a Maimer from Tavshin Yud Beis, Adnei Sfasai Tiftach, when the Rebbe turned 50. We have a Maimer from Tavshin Chav Beis, when the Rebbe turned 60. And then basically from Tavshin Lamed Aleph and on, 1971 and on, every year was a Fabreng in Yud Aleph Nisan with a Maimer, usually a Pesach-related Maimer. And it was a collection of Maimorim. So that would have been a Kevitz, a Kunteris, Yud Aleph Nisan of all the Rebbe's Maimorim. The Rebbe responded that Ein Hazman Gromi doesn't have the time to edit them. So Yatziu suggests something that I don't need to edit. So it's very unrare that the Rebbe should write, suggest something. You know, the Rebbe could say yes, no, which I saw as being, and everyone in our team saw as being a tremendous opportunity. The Rebbe is actually asking us to suggest something. So we racked our brains and we went around asking everybody, what can we do for your Alfnis? And the Rebbe is saying Yatziu, something that the Rebbe doesn't have to edit, so it can't be labor intensive for the Rebbe, but something worthy and respectable. And the consensus ended up being, and I wrote to the Rebbe back at consulting with Mumchim and Didim and Meitzim La'er and I guess Chassidim, that the suggestion is to publish a 2-section book, journal. One would be things connected to Shmeinim, Shana, like the Kapitel Tilim, Pei and Pei Alef, which begins being said on Yud Aleph Nisan, and with Yal Er from the Tzemach Tzedek, which is the Rishimas, the commentary and the notes of the Tzemach Tzedek on Tilim. We had things from different places that talk about Shemeinim, Shana, and Chassidus, and Eira Teira, from the Rebbe's father, Likut Levi Yitzchak, Teiras Levi Yitzchak. And we gave a list of things. That would be the one half, the Teira. And the second half would be stories and articles about the Rebbe's Pa'ulas and activities and accomplishments in the world, or the Shlichus or Mivtzoyim and so on. The Rebbe sent out the zettel and wrote Ach v'rak kevitz teirani, only exclusively a kevitz of Teira, basically negating and rejecting the second part of it. And he added some more things in what we wrote about the Teira connected to Shmeinim Shana, and that's what we did. We published a kevitz at Alfnis. But here's a perfect example of what I mentioned before. The Rebbe said in the first Fabring, in the official Fabring, Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud Aleph, Letzach and Stein Feglich in Buzim, the Schwerfleg Zong, Feglich in Buzim, don't deceive yourself into thinking that I'm going to do the work for you. I will meet you halfway, essentially, paraphrasing the Rebbe. And this became a staple, a standard, a cornerstone of the Rebbe's Nesius, that you have to do your part and I will help you. But you can't expect me to do your part. Even the words of Chav Ches Nisan, Nun Aleph, ring with that message. Ich getan alles was ich kann, it's the tut was ihr kennt. I did everything I can, I'll do what you can. So that spirit, exactly in that spirit, after the Rebbe wrote only a Kevis Teira, and he wrote what that should be structured like, and it came out Kevis Yud Aleph Nisan. Every year since we gave out a Kevis Yud Aleph Nisan, not right away, later, every year we started giving out every year. The Rebbe wrote the Eid V'Iker on the bottom, and he wrote maybe 20, 30, 25 lines. His suggestion to print a special Tanya, and the Tanya should have all the sharblots of all the Tanyas that have been published, and then they were less than what they were now. They were less than 1,000, I think, probably much less than that even. And the Rebbe gave details, what kind of bendlach, which is the bookmarks, and the size, and everything, and gave really details how to publish it. And this is now. The Rebbe wrote us Yatziu. We should suggest. We're obviously not. We're going to suggest a Tanya. It's only a Rebbe Sheinian who would suggest such a thing. But because we made the Keli, the Rebbe responded, which is, as I said, classic Rebbe, classic Teira mitzvahs is like this. Susa de Latata, then comes the Susa de La'ela. And the reason I'm sharing it, because you asked the question, how to make yourself Nisan meaningful. The Rebbe, by the Rebbe, meaningful meant not some type of frivolous and type of superficial celebrations. It's to commit to the Rebbe, his Teira, and his directives. And starting, Ach v'rak Teira. The Rebbe was Kulei Teira, every Fabrenger. Even the ones that talk about Mivtzoyim and talk about actions. So if someone didn't know and they just looked superficially at Chabad, you could think the Rebbe was a social activist. However, if you look at every Fabrenger, there was no such thing as just the Rebbe talked activist. It was always the end of the Sikh. Profound, dense, complicated talks about every topic under the sun, every topic in Teira, Chol Chelket Teira, all the sections of the Teira. So you want to celebrate the Rebbe's birthday, the Rebbe's Mazolei Gever, you celebrate living the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's living is Teira, Teira, Teira. That's his union, is Torah. Torah is the Rebbe's, Torah Meloshen Heira. Torah is the way the Rebbe communicated, the way all the Rebbeim communicated. So the Unaffordable, the first thing is to learn the Rebbe's Torah, to connect to that Torah, make it relevant and personal in your life, not just to be Yetzeh. And of course, Talmud Gadol Shemevil de Maisa. The Torah always leads to Heira. There's no sikha from the Rebbe, no talk from the Rebbe that does not lead to a bechein, to an outcome, to some practical action, some application in our lives, the lives of our communities, and lives of others. Pesach, always in this tkufa, that I would always talk about providing shmura matzah to Jews that need it. Make sure that every Jew comes to a seder, including the fifth child, as the Rebbe talked about in the Yuds. The fifth child, that besides the four children, the one that doesn't even come to the seder, even a she'eni de'elisha, it doesn't even come, and all the other directives connected to that. This is how we celebrate Alef Nisan. Now, each year, of course, has its unique element. You could say, okay, that was last year. Well, that's why you have to add both in kamos and in echus, both in quantity and in quality. And this connection. This is the day when we connect with the Rebbe. This is the day when the Eibishter sent the Rebbe down to earth, that he emerged in this world 115 years ago to bring the Deir HaShvi that would come, even though he was born in the time of the Rebbe Rashab, but then the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, to bring the Geula down to this earth. And that's the primary mission. But Geula, as we also know, the Derech Yeshara is again to learn. Lilmed in Yana Geula Mashiach, to learn. You cannot be Mashiachdik if you don't understand, and your mindset and your heart set is not aligned to what Geula means. So this is an opportunity for us to do something in that regard, and do it in a revolutionary way. That's what I'd like to add to the point. In a revolutionary way. We know that Meir Shana, the Rebbe speaks in a number of places based on the Tanya Perek Tezvah from the Gemara Menachos. Meir is a complete cycle, but Meir Pam Va'achas is where you go beyond your comfort zone. And that's where the real Aveda begins. Now we're 15 years after Meir, so it's Kuf Tezvov, and begin Kapitel Kuf Tezayin. So it teaches us to do things in a revolutionary fashion. A revolutionary fashion means to, yes, once and for all, let's get off our laurels, our comfort zones, and do what the Rebbe charged us to do, which is to finally make that push to bring the Geula. And how you do that, like the Rebbe said in the Sichos in Nun Alef and in Nun Beis and before, Derech Yeshara, there's learning and living it as if it's a reality. If you do your part in your Futsa Menesecha Chutza, what does that mean? It means that you live Chassidus. What does the Rambam say is La'asad Love? Lo ye'esek kol ha'elam el ladasas Hashem uvad. The entire business of the world will be to know God. Materialism will be a means to knowing God. Molar is Deus Hashem, kamayim leyom mechasim. In the language of the Baal Shem Tov hearing from Mashiach, kishia futsu ma'nesecha chutza, when the ma'nesecha, which is the ma'nesecha, which is the ladasas Hashem and the Deus Hashem, your futsu will spread and submerge the entire world in even the chutza, even the most external and farthest recesses and farthest corners of the earth, that it should be kamayim layom achasim. How do you begin? By living that yourself. Take Chassidus. If each of us would learn Chassidus in a way that's applied to our personal life, and it's a cheder, a snem durach, it completely permeates you through and through, and you take an idea of Chassidus, the idea from the Rebbe's Maimer, you live it, and then you teach it to others. And as a role model, Dugma Chai, you show an example, a living example. This is the living Yud Alef Nisan. So it's not just a day to commemorate and to remember, it's a day to act, and a day formed action and formed by learning, which was the essence of what the Rebbe was all about. Now, how do you inspire yourself? Well, you either find ways to ignite the soul inside of you, at least for that day, and then hopefully can continue on. And most importantly, be with others. Make a fabrengen. The ishas echav yazeru, we each support and we each strengthen each other, and hopefully we can do it in a way that was unprecedented, in a way that we could be zeichet to be reunited with the Rebbe and the Gula Amitis V'Hashleim. Next, another question. This generation of millennials is faced with a totally different task than our parents were. Our parents grew up going to fabrengens, spending Tishrei with the Rebbe, having yechidus, and going by the Rebbe to get dollars. It seems that it was easier for them to foster a palpable connection to the Rebbe, and therefore also easier for them to imbue their children with a sense of Hiskashrus. Hiskashrus is connection. How will parents now, who didn't grow up seeing the Rebbe, imbue their children with the same sense of Hiskashrus and connection? It seems like our Hiskashrus isn't as strong as our parents, so how will our children grow up with feeling toward the Rebbe if we're the impoverished ones feeding it to them? Okay, well, as we've always promised, this is a program where we take all questions, uncensored. And here's a very blunt and straight question, and absolutely, and I'll even amplify it. We are now 25 years since Chav Zayin Adar, since the Rebbe spoke to us last year. Who could believe? 25 years since we heard the Rebbe's words from his mouth, Begashmis, and it's 23 years from Gimel Tammuz. It's a generation. People today, 25 years old, were born after Gimel Tammuz, after Chav Zayin Adar. And those that are born 30 years old were 5 years old then. So it's a whole generation. We're not talking 2-3 years now. So the question is a very relevant one, and something that we must address, especially in Alef, and what better time to address it. So I've talked about this topic a number of times. I'll just put it in my own words this way. It's a challenge. That's very clear. It's a challenge. But at the same time, I want to be aware. I'm not 25 years old. I'm not 30 years old. I was there. It was my heyday. I hope I still have a heyday, but it was the high point of our lives. And I have to tell you, challenge existed then too. The Rebbe was begashmis here, and yes, we went to Fabrengens and Yechidus and Tishrei and everything you mentioned. But at the end of the day, we had a Yetzer Hara too, and it's easy to go and become complacent. And sometimes you don't even appreciate the great light and the great Giluim and revelations that are right in front of your nose. So don't think the challenges didn't exist. The only thing is, we had that additional push, additional presence itself, and I'm not minimizing it. But the challenge always exists. What I would say is, and this is how I would phrase it, the challenge today is to appreciate the nitzchias, the eternity of what the Rebbe represents. We spoke about this last week, the Sikha Vayikra Mem Zayin. I suggest reading it because it's a very appropriate Yud Aleph Nisan type of related Sikha. And it hints, of course, to Yud Aleph Nisan. The nitzchias means, when the Rebbe is here begashmias, so his mere presence, the giluim of the Rebbe, were so powerful that it carried us on his wings. And all these giluim you mentioned absolutely had an impact on people and changed their lives. Today, we don't have that gashmizdik gilui. So what we need to do is dig deeper and touch the etzim of the Rebbe, not just the giluim of the Rebbe. So is it harder? Yes, it's harder, but it's not impossible. And what is the etzim? That's why I said the Torah. The Rebbe, at the end of the day, as the Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaKedesh, Chayit Tzadikim is Chayim Ruchnim, not only after Gimel Tammuz. Even Begashmi is right when you see them, you see a physical Rebbe, it's Chayim Ruchnim, Chayim of Ava, V'yira, and Amunah, as he says in the Geras HaKedesh, Siman Chov Zayin, 27th epistle, as they put it. He says that clearly. You see a body, and you can touch a body, and you can dance and see and fabring and all that. That's how it manifests. In a way, that's a gift to us, so we can relate to it on our physical terms. But the fact that the Gashmiz, the Kekeli, is not visible to us does not mean the Nitzchi is the eternity in any way is affected. Kedusha le'zazim came, as I shared the story last week, about that even the Kalim, even the table, the chair, the room, the things he was involved in, the things he was immersed in, the Rebbe, it lives on forever. And for sure is Aveda, and for sure is Torah, and for sure his actions. However, today is dependent on us to live with that. Is it challenging? Absolutely, as I stated. But this is what we have to think about Yud Aleph Nisan. Now, I can tell you, I've seen parents who have not seen the Rebbe, and they have their own children now, and when they connected this, in some way they convey that to them. It would have been easier if they gave a snapshot or a video and say, here, this is what it looked like when we danced with the Rebbe. Of course it would be easier. It was easier. But this doesn't mean we cannot do it. We have to dig deeper. And we have to connect to the eternity of what Chassidus represents, what the Rebbe represents, and the mission that we were charged with. That does not end. You have children. Teach them what their mission in life is. God forbid to say the mission, God forbid, in any way has faltered or waned in any way. We have to connect as stronger, maybe as strong, and if not stronger, to the etzem ha'inyan, to the truth of it. Now, you say, I need words for that. Yes, you may need words. You may need work. Where it would have been easier just to schlep your children or yourself to the Fabrengen or to Simchas Torah or to Tkiyas or whatever it may be. But since when are we avoiding work? That's part of our shlichus in this life. Like the Alter Rebbe makes it clear in Tanya that life is a struggle. Be at peace with it. That's the purpose. Now the struggle includes this element. We'd all prefer that it had been different, that it should have been different, but it's not impossible. And it's not just videos, and it's not just pictures. That helps, but it's really connecting in a resonating way. Because I know people who met the Rebbe Begashmis and still didn't resonate for them in a way that they made it their own. They rode high on the Rebbe's Giluyim. We always have to make it our own. We have to own it. And to own it means that you relate to the mission, you relate to the message, you relate to its empowerment, you relate to it as it's your calling, and what you're charged with to fulfill your goal in this life. That's our challenge, to teach our children that we are messengers and we are ambassadors and agents of the shlichus the Eibishter gave us, which the Rebbe told us the shlichus to do what we have to do in fulfilling that shlichus. It's not to make money, it's not little side businesses, it's not that. That is the reason, neshama lama yarda neshmasa beguf. That's how we have to speak to our children. Why did your soul come down to this world? Now you could say, well, you don't feel it yourself that way, so that's what we have to start thinking. Maybe Heshiv Levovos Albonim, when we have to explain it to our children, we ourselves have to get more inspired. Why did your neshama come down to this earth? And the Rebbe provided the answer, as a Rebbe should. A Rebbe is a leader of a generation, to make a dira b'tachtenim in general. But in our case, the dira shvi, to finish the job in bringing the geula by learning Chassidus, by making it our own reality, by yikral keil elam, making the reality of existence, making it, yes, applied Chassidus to our personal lives, that we live with it in a pnimiusdik way, not just as a memory, not just out of amunah and faith, and by rote and do mechanically, but something that permeates who we are and fully permeates your whole being. This is the challenge. Now that you know the challenge, now figure out how to do it. And how to do it means you have to have a very deliberate, yes, very conscientious and deliberate approach. What you speak to your children in the morning, what you speak in the evening, how you imbue their lives, their homes, their environment, their chinuch, with the message of the Rebbe and the Yiddishkeit. Pesach is coming. What are you going to say by the Seder? We're going to just go through the motions? Or you make it come alive, what Mitzias Mitzrayim means based on Chassidus, based on the Mamorim and Sichos of the Rebbe. How you go out of your own Mitzarim v'gvulim, your own limitations. What matzah is. The Rebbe gave us a Haggadah. The first formal sefer the Rebbe published, well, Hayem Yem, but there's also the Haggadah. And the genius of the Haggadah has already been documented, concise. You have Hiras from the Rebbe, of course, the halachas. So there's a way of living Pesach, not just going through the motion, but Pesach imbued with the Rebbe's approach, the Rebbe's stories. We have the Menhogim the Rebbe did at his Seder. But not just, again, as memories and nice, nostalgic, the past, but living about it as it's today. So we're coming a Yontif. How do you imbue the Yontif with the spirit of the Rebbe, of Chassidus, of the Rabbeim, of Teda, and Primis HaTeda in the fullest sense of the word? So, obviously, this is one of the reasons we do this every week, My Life. I can't go through now a detailed game plan. Each one of us has to figure it out, but that's the challenge. Once you have the challenge, the next part is to implement it. And there's many ways to do it. Discuss it with your spouse, discuss it with your children. You pay attention, simas lev, and you are not lazy, and don't just rely on miracles. You actually actually ask your children, you engage your children. You'll be surprised what kind of passion and excitement you can create. Even though we don't have the Gashmis of the Rebbe, but the Ruchnis of the Rebbe lives nitzchizdik, as I said. Okay, next topic. It's connected to Pesach, and this is more of a little more painful topic. I'm not saying painful, not quite in the psychological sense, but in a practical sense, economically. This is the question, why did Pesach become unaffordable? With Pesach just around the corner, the expenses of the Yontif are weighing down on many families. Is Pesach and Jewish holidays in general supposed to cost families so much? If the cost is high because our spending actually enhances the mitzvah of Yontif, then it's easier to swallow. But how are we to know if this is what God intended Yom Tov to be like? Or perhaps we have made standards and therefore expenses higher than higher on our own. Or even worse, perhaps this is simply due to the price gouging of vendors taking advantage of the demands of Pesach consumers. Another writer writes, indifferent to a similar idea, as Pesach approaches, I can't help going through the same thought process as I did last year. With a large family, the cost ends up being astronomical. Is this what Chachamim had in mind for Pesach? It would be a disappointment if another year goes by and have to worry about the same issue when there must be something that can be done. Okay, well, this is one of the questions that is borderline question of whether it belongs in MyLife Essays Applied, but it's a question that's on people's minds, and obviously it's a question we would love to be able to ask the Rebbe. I don't know if the Rebbe ever addressed this particular topic, but I do know he addressed, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, the high prices of housing in this community. And of course, that was when the prices weren't even close to what they are today. And that's back in Tafshin Memhei. Actually, the same psyche that Rebbe talked about the first time revealed what happened with the Sfarim, and spoke very sharply about the theft of the books. He began with the Shchuna, and he spoke about the prices going up and people simply causing aggravation and pain to Jews by creating prices that are unaffordable and prohibitive. Now we know today we hear this a lot more about it because the prices are not even comparable. And the Rebbe says that Jews have to love each other and care for each other. You can't just think of it as a business, that you do whatever's good for you, and dog eats dog, I'm using my own expression, where we have to be sensitive and considerate to others. So I'm not going to give any type of ruchnisdik explanation why the prices go up, because I don't think there's a ruchnisdik element involved. Obviously, Pesach has halachas, has minhagim. Here's not the place to go into what your standards are. The standard should be what you grew up with, what your mashpiyim teach you, what you feel comfortable. But the problem is the prices do go up, and yes, unfortunately, I think it's level 3. It's not necessarily God's will, and it's not necessarily, as you put it, only our standards. Unfortunately, there is gouging. There's taking advantage. I'm not here to criticize anybody, but the fact of the matter is you have to wonder. The same food, the same ingredients. I understand when you talk about prepared foods, even on Shabbos, a prepared food is going to cost you more than if you prepare it yourself. But to charge for the main ingredients because it's Pesach and people have to buy it, and this became like the custom of the land that you have to raise the prices, is inconsiderate. It's inconsiderate. Now, this has to be Chassidish vendors and Chassidish shopkeepers and so on need to make a parnas, I understand. But that they make a cheshbon hanefesh in their own heart if they stood before the Rebbe, whether they are doing something that's a little more greedy and selfish. I'm not here to say musar, it's not my job to do, but since the topic is on the table, we have to all look at it. Unfortunately, all of us can be guilty of that in our own way, that when we are in the the controlling end, where people need us, sometimes we can become a little greedy and a little selfish. And that's exactly what Pesach tries to eliminate. The Pesach is matzah, not chametz, not the yeshus and ego and the inflated ego of chametz, but matzah, a little bittul. So maybe we should take bittul to heart, not just as a nice concept or when we break the yachats or the matzahs and we talk about it and we eat matzah, but actually in our lives. He talked about applying chassidus, he talked about applying yontif. This is how the Rebbe would want us to live a Pesach, should be a more bittul-dik Pesach. And bittul begins sometimes, yes, in the pocketbook of how we treat each other and how we charge each other. So I have no real answer to the question why it's becoming unaffordable. It's supply and demand. When people feel they can take advantage, they do. I would suggest, as a consumer point of view, try to find places that charge less, and maybe we can create a competition which will cause prices to drop instead of prices to go up. If someone will drop a little lower, there'll be an incentive for people to go to them. That's how I see it. Everybody deserves to make their parnas, as I said, but parnas, there's halachas for what parnas entails, and not, as the Rebbe said in that teshuva of Tamas Sicha, not to make people's life miserable or difficult. And yes, some people do suffer, and it's very difficult. And Moyes Chitim is a tremendous mitzvah. Moyes Chitim is to help those that can't, that need the money to buy the grain or to buy matzahs. But it's also Pesach needs. But better than Moyes Chitim is preventing the need for Moyes Chitim. Unfortunately, those that need it, and that's what our responsibility is, to give them the help and the support they need to be able to have a Chag Pesach kosher v'sameach without financial worries. But that doesn't mean that the vendors and the storekeepers and so on, suppliers, have to take advantage and create more moyes chitim than necessary. As the Rebbe said then in that sikha, he said, someone will come, a chassidish person will say, Ala nizik fa nigzim in hashamayim, Hagadol Kodesh says. If a person has to pay a higher price, they have to already God planned. It's not me, so I'm just taking it. The Rebbe said, but why do you make yourself a shliach? He doesn't have to do it through you. So let's not make ourselves too holy here and saying I'm justifying it because I'm the shliach. Basically, you're paying more money, so that way you shows Mesiras Nefesh for Pesach, and I'm taking it, so I'm doing you a favor actually. The Rebbe negates this whole thing with V'kol completely in that sikha, even though he's not talking about food and Pesach, but it's the same idea. So that's what I want to say about this. I don't have much more to say on it. If anybody has anything to add, by all means, always welcome comments and additions. If something from the Rebbe would be really good, and take it from there. Okay. Let's now move to another question, a very important question. And I'm sure I've talked about it to some extent. And this is a question, is there a healthy versus an unhealthy way of becoming a baal teshuva? As a child of baal teshuva, I struggle with the strict guidelines, especially on Pesach, that my parents imposed upon me and my siblings. I love my parents dearly, but as I've grown into an adult, I've come to realize that despite their good intentions, they were ignorant and just blindly followed whatever their mashpia or other influences told them. They actually turned to us as the children for direction often. Furthermore, my parents are both well educated and could have been highly professional success stories in their respective fields. Now it's their prerogative to have given all that up in the embrace of Yiddishkeit. But I often wonder what this severe break from their past did to their psyches and self-esteem, and how it impacted us as their children. Is it indeed healthy to completely reject one's past even if you find the path of truth? Is there a healthy versus an unhealthy way of becoming a baal teshuva? Your programs are both deeply refreshing and stimulating, and above all grounded in the sources. I know my parents listen to them, and that it also touches their natural intelligence and sensibilities. So perhaps your discussing this topic can help them and help their children find some resolution to our differences. Well, I think this question speaks for itself, doesn't need much elaboration. So let me respond, and let's use Pesach as a good example. On one hand, it says in halacha that when a person becomes a baal teshuva, like a ger, in different context, you don't remind them of their past. Simply a cruel thing to do. They've changed, they've grown through their past. You don't remind them. At the same time, you find, the Chassidus talks about the birur, the aliyah. I spoke before about the transformation. It's not just you reject the past and you move on. You also mile it, you transform it. We say it's zdeinus laslei kezochis, teshuva ma'ava, the highest level of teshuva. You transform zdeinus, crimes, into zochis, into merits. So there's this teshuva me'ira, lower levels of teshuva. You don't transform it, you move on. But the ultimate is transformation. And psychologically speaking, when a person does make changes in their life, anyone, it's impossible to be a healthy person to just cut the whole past as it doesn't exist. That's what your childhood was like. Those are your parents. Despite the fact that much of it may have been something you today chose to do differently, but there are elements that remain part of you. You are still your parents' children. You still carry their genes. You still carry things that you picked up. So maybe, yes, you may have gone and moved from a tinuk shenishba life where you didn't know better, and now you're Shem Shabbos, and now you eat kosher and you do other things. But as I once heard, a marriage counselor telling a couple who were baal teshuva themselves, and even though I don't like the name baal teshuva, to be honest, I'm just using it because the questioner used it. Because what's the opposite of a baal teshuva? Let's be honest. So most people say tzaddikim. But that would imply that anyone who's not a baal teshuva, FFB as they call it, or gezha, or whatever you want to call it, is a tzaddik. And we know that's not the case. So the opposite of baal teshuva really is a baal aveda. Or you can say there are people programmed and culturally grew up in a frum world, and there are people not. And then they embraced it. But however you interpret it, so I once heard from a mashpia, he said something interesting to a couple who were having marital issues. And he said, you both think you did teshuva because once you didn't keep kosher, now you do. Once you didn't keep Shabbos, now you do. You're sending your children to Jewish schools, Chassidic schools. So you feel everything's changed. You did teshuva b'maisa. You did it in action. But there's teshuva b'lev, in your heart. If you have an angry streak, did you do teshuva on that? You came with your angry streak that you had in the previous life and you brought it with you here. If you have other passive or passive-aggressive tools and mechanisms that you learned from your home, you brought them as well. Real teshuva begins not in Maisa. Maisa now, okay, so now you're equal to those that are doing those Maisim. But everybody, kol yom b'tshuva, all days are filled with tshuva. Why? Because tshuva entails transformational change and personality growth and character development. As we will begin during the second day of Pesach, we'll begin counting the Emer, the refinement, the bitter of the midas. Chesed shebechesed till malchus shebemalchus. It's about personality growth. And that's a much harder tshuva. It's much easier to keep Shabbos and kosher and the other halachas. Yes, it's a change, and it could be a complete transformation, a complete paradigm shift from one's past. But personality is a whole different story. And without again any critique, the point of the matter is, yes, it's possible to move from a non-tshuva life to a tshuva life, and still carry all the baggage that you came with. So the critical thing is to understand we have to learn to integrate our past into our future. You reject the peel, but you take the fruit. There are many beautiful things that you may have grown up with. You love, other nurturing, things that you reject. And when that transition is a seamless one, or at least as much as seamless as it can be, then you're talking about a healthy type of environment. It's true, many baal teshuva who came didn't know better, so they did whatever they were told, which created almost a lack of respect from their children to them, or something that was not with any discretion or intelligence. It was, this is what we're told to do. And the children, in a sense, and then you grow up an adult like this, eloquent writer writes, and you realize your parents never really owned it. They did it, and it's very commendable, and they have that as their right. But what happened with their personalities? What happened with the books they read? What happens with the skills that they gained? Do they just ignore that? That's why Chassidus is not just rejecting, it's growing through our past, taking the things we've learned, extracting the sparks of Gedusha, and turning them into something positive. And that needs direction and proper hashpah. So your questions are excellent questions. I would say is that we have to take the cards we were dealt with. Yes, there are people who maybe ran from a very desperate or very unhealthy environment and dysfunctional environment. That's what led them to Yiddishkeit. Others sense the truth of it. But no matter what the catalyst was, the integration is the big challenge. And unfortunately, that needs a little more sophistication and a little more subtleties. How to teach a person to grow into their Yiddishkeit. And that may mean not to jump too quickly, to go step by step. And this requires sensitive and wise counsel and common sense from good mashpim who know how to do this. Are there those that do it wrongly? Yes, so clearly we see bad advice has caused problems. So I would say to you as a child, now you're an adult, you love your family, you love your parents. Why don't you talk about this? Make it a conversation. A very peaceful conversation, not with resentment, not with grievances, not with anger. A decent conversation. You may be surprised that your parents maybe are more thoughtful than you think they are. Because people think about these things. They may not talk about it. So make this a conversation. Let's make it a conversation in all our families. And not just a conversation by BTs, but also by FABs, because all of us need this. All of us need an honest appraisal of integrating our Torah, our mitzvahs, our Yiddishkeit, our Chassidishkeit into our realities. Because we all know, God knows, that we all have our compartmentalization, our dissonance, our inconsistencies. And that's the whole purpose of integration. So this question is really a question to all of us as we teach our children. And going back to the theme I spoke about earlier, connected to Alef Nisan, this is how we bring the Rebbe into our lives today. Today it has to be real. You can't just say, I'll schlep you to 770 and the Rebbe will do his magic. Today it has to be far more personal and far more relevant and far more integrated, because we don't have that, I don't call it crutch, but we don't have that thing to fall back on. That's our challenge. Tut al zosir kent. We have to do something on our own. And there's no question, anything you do, a small thing, Hashem already helps. The Rebbe helps and gives the brachas that we should be able to see the fruit of our labor with the least amount of aggravation and effort. Okay. There are more questions, but I want to be able to have the time to also go over the essay contest. And though these are all interesting things, I know some of you, and many of you, especially those that were informed that they're in the top 30 finalists, are anticipating to hear that. But I will go over just quickly a few more things, and then we'll go over to the essay contest, the Chassidus question, and then the essay contest. So we have some feedback, but that, you know what, I'm going to move that to the next week. So that way we can have more time and I don't have to rush things. But I will address one question, because this is also very interesting since it's Alef Nisan, another Chiddush of the Rebbe. Thank you so much for your inspiring weekly classes. This question is titled, Why do we derogatorily refer to non-Jews in davening as dust of the earth? Didn't God create them with a role to play as well? Thank you so much for your inspiring weekly classes. I have a question from davening that has been bothering me for a while. In the preamble to morning davening, we quote the prophet Yeshaya. Indeed, the nations are like a drop that's left over from the bottom of a bucket of water, which people don't bother to collect. They are considered as meaningless as the dust on scales, which people don't bother to wipe off before weighing something. How can the prophet describe humanity as leftovers and meaningless? From what we learn, it would seem all of humanity has a role to play in the world. And certainly it is hard to fathom that over 99.99% of humanity is meaningless. What did the prophet mean, and why do we quote him in davening on a daily basis? And you can add a bunch of other quotes that are similar and have created an impression exactly as you're asking a very good question. So I want to respond with a story that happened, again, in the world of Sichas that we worked on since it's Alef. Listen, Geschmack Meis. And this story happened in Tofshin Mem Daled. The Rebbe spoke at a Farbrengen. Was it Mem Daled or Mem Gimel? Mem Gimel, I'm sorry, Tofshin Mem Gimel. It was Shabbos Pashas Beshalach, and the Rebbe speaking about the loss of the Mashiach will come, and then he said an expression, he said, and Mashiach today, we've already finished all the work, and we've definitely gone through Yetzer, all the tzadis and all the gzedis and all the decrees, so it'll be peaceful, no one will have to die, no goyim, not Eden, no one will have to die. That was the gist of it. If you know the Gemara in Sanhedrin, and the pasuk v'charker b'nei sheis in Bolok, Pasha Bolok, so there are two opinions. It says when Mashiach comes, either 2/3, B'nai Sheis goes, 2/3 of the world will be, of the non-Jews will be killed, or 2/3 of 2/3. Two opinions. So I asked the question to the Rebbe. What does he mean by that statement? How does it reconcile with the Gemara? And the Rebbe wrote that Bli neder, which would have been not that next week yesterday, it was the next week, was, I believe, Mishpat. And the Rebbe, which meant that the Rebbe had a lot more to say, answer, often the Rebbe would answer B'ksav in writing, but when there was more to say, that's what he said. So I'm really anticipating that Farbrengen, and in Mishpat, that taka happened. And that Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, mit gefregt de Shaila, and this is what the Rebbe, I remember as soon as he said the next line, I remember I was stunned. The Rebbe said, mit gefregt de Shaila from the Gemara, mit sich nicht gechapt, bekleibt sich nicht vernah. He didn't realize the question is not on me, the question is on the Gemara. Since Rachem al kol ma'asav, the Eibishter is a compassionate God, and he's compassionate on all his creatures, how could he 2/3 or 2/3 of 2/3 of the world be destroyed or killed? How could he allow such a thing? I remember, as a chazer, I had to keep focused to what the Rebbe was going to say, but that split second, I thought to myself, 1 second, the Gemara, how do you learn this Gemara? How do they learn this Gemara for all thousands of years? The mere fact that the Rebbe did not accept that the Gemara could mean literally, it was itself a revelation. And then the Rebbe went on. And this, by the way, became a sikh, Lekutei Sichos. It's a sikh on Bolok, but if you look at the back, Bolok and Chelik Chov Gimel, on this pasuk, you'll see it's not a Bolok sikh, it's a Beshalach Mishpatim Mem Gimel sikh. And the Rebbe Bekitzis first said maybe the answer is that they will not die, they will not be killed, but they will die out because their power to give birth will be taken from them. The Rebbe said that's also achzari, that's also cruel. And the Rebbe's answer, v'charker b'nei sheish, v'charker like kiloyin does not mean death. It means bitl hametziyas, that the bitl hatzura, the personality and shape that they have in this world, will be eliminated when Mashiach comes because they'll take on a new shape. Similar to the idea, I can't say mamash the same thing when the Rebbe speaks about kam l'Rabbe v'shachta l'Rab Zera v'shachta in v'shachta lo Moshiach. Not he killed him, he elevated him, and that was the beer, and it's printed and so on. So let me ask you a question: how do people learn this Gemara without the Rebbe Sikha? How did they learn it before? We learn it kipshuti. Goyim are anti-Semites. Rishayim says, what's the surprise that 2/3 of them will be punished for what they did to us? The Rebbe did not accept it. Why? Not because you can't learn the Gemara that way. It depends what the Goyim are like. If the Chefza changes, the Gemara changes. Not the Gemara changes. Let me correct myself. The Pshat in the Gemara has to be learned differently. So obviously, if you're dealing with Amalek, and the entire 7 billion people on this earth were Nazis, and they're mamish, the worst of the worst, and every way pagan and anti-God, that's one thing. Even then, you have to see what alternatives you have. Even the Mitzrayim were drowning in the sea. Hashem said to the Melachim, when you're singing Shira, when my creatures are drowning, you're singing songs. So they deserved it, but it's not time to sing. But since we're talking about a world that has become refined, and we have the halacha of the Rambam and Perek Ches and the Malachim at the end of Perek Ches, that we have a mitzvah also to influence them to do the Shem mitzvah. And as the Rebbe says, the Goyish world is a malchus shel chesed about the United States, the charity, the humanitarianism, the fact that we live in a world that is absolutely conducive and respects and allows Jews to do anything they wish in their Yiddishkeit. Any enemy is only within. That doesn't mean there aren't anti-Semites, that doesn't mean there aren't enemies, but institutionally, the world has changed in many, many ways. So from the Rebbe's point of view, the world gets more refined. So when we talk about all these statements, you're talking about the Goyishkeit. The Goyish Bekirbuchat is the Goyishkeit. When the Torah says, Le'yih k'maisa knani, so many halachas are about that, it's the Goyishkeit, it's the paganism. Now there's still halachas, Atav v'chatanu, l'havdli ben Yisrael la'amim, and intermarriage issues and so on, because we have different roles. But that has nothing to do with because one is bad and one is good. But the evil, so to speak, and these different nevuos like you're quoting and others are talking about the goy as a goyishkeit of a goy. The Amalek type, the Mitzrayim type, those that were pagan and antithetical to God. So today we also say that because we still want to knock out the goyishkeit of Elam Haz. The goyishkeit means that which defies God. That's what we're talking about. Now, if a goy embraces that defying of God, then it's also embodied in him as a person. But if he doesn't embrace it, and he embraces chesed, and the Shev mitzvahs, yeshlam chelik le'elam haba. How could Yeshaya say that about a chassidu miselam? Clearly he's not talking about chassidu miselam. So the Rebbe, the Gemara, the Rebbe's way of interpreting the Gemara enlightens us in this way. So it depends what you're talking about. If you talk about the goyim in a certain type of state, then some of these statements may apply. But today, there's no question that the Rebbe feels. He says clearly the goal is we're on the threshold. Otot, the world is ready. That's just a matter of revealing the refinement, and we're in a different type of world. Again, this doesn't mean that every individual, same thing Lahavla by Jews, not every individual is also in the perfect state. So there maybe needs more discussion, but that's how I would explain it. And that explains this pasuk and other tefillas and psukim and so on. You're talking about the goyishkeit, absolutely. You want to eliminate Mikol V'Kol in every possible way, the antithetical, the anti-God elements of paganism that reigned in the time of Avram Avinu, which is why Avram rebelled against it. But the world is no longer in the time of Avram. We're not living with a Nimrod who's in control or other such forces. There may be remnants and there may be elements, and we're working on it, but that's the whole point of preparing the world for Geula. Molad is Deis Hashem, as the Rambam says, is Kol Elam, all people, not just Eden. Now, I talked about the Jewish and non-Jewish issues in a previous episodes. I won't go into that, but that answers that. If you prefer a follow-up, as I said, I'll do the follow-up in the following weeks. Let's do the Chassidus question, and then we'll do the countdown of the winners of this year's third annual MyLife Chassidus Applied Contest. The Chassidus question is, can you please explain the world of Tohu? We're taught that in this world there was Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of the containers. But why would God create a world in the first place which will explode? If the problem was an imbalance, then why didn't God create it properly balanced in the first place and avoid the shattering? Why didn't God create it properly balanced and avoid the shattering in the first place? Why would God create an imbalanced world? An excellent question. Because remember, Tohu is not man-made. If you're talking about people who have free will and they're given a healthy life and then they shatter it, okay, that's the free will. But Tohu is a world, a divine world. As a matter of fact, Tohu is Eidus Gdelim, Eidus Merubim, intense energies, divine energies. It's a world that precedes Tikkun, Atzilus even. However, there's an imbalance between the Eid and the Keli. And therefore there's the shattering on some of the levels, on the Midas level, but it affects the entire world. So we know from the Maimorim, from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimor, the famous Maimor of Tofresh Tzadik, Alef, Mnuach HaMeshel, is it that's the Maimor? Oh, Ken Yemen HaMeshel. I may forget the Dibra Maskell, same thing, Lamed Aleph, Bosiligani, and some other places, that there's a evolution. The Tzimtzum Arishon, of course, is the first time there's a paradigm shift, and the first quantum leap from Elokus B'Pshitus, a divine reality, to allowing the room, space for independent reality. That leads to Shviras HaKelim. That leads to the diminishment of the moon, and that led to the Chet Tzadas, the ability for a Chet Tzadas. So the dissonance that the Tzimtzum introduced led to other levels of dissonance. When you understand that, you realize Shviras HaKelim is not a plan God decides is going to destroy some containers and create imbalance. The imbalance is that Tzimtzum is imbalance. And in many ways, you could actually say that Tohu is like a market correction. What do I mean? If everything is healthy and seamless, everything is working well. But since the Tzimtzum created a distortion is that on this side of the Tzimtzum, we can deceive ourselves into thinking that not just God is concealed, that God has disappeared. Like the Rebbe speaks in the Tush B'Shvat, the classic Tafshin Lamed Tes Sicha, he says, Zunti gesucht, Manti gesucht, that God has concealed himself so well that we forget that he's there. So therefore, Tzimtzum leaves room for the possibility of a true distortion, where we think God is Imen Elikim, that God is not there. Imen Elikim B'Kirbeinu, as the Rebbe quotes there. That he's not here with us. God forbid. So Shviras HaKelim is like a protest that something is wrong. And that protest expresses itself in a break. So it's actually a healthy thing. When we have an unhealthy situation in our lives, do you want us to act as everything is going well? So the Tzimtzum's dissonance, in a sense, it compels that there should be somewhere a protest, that somewhere in the system there's going to be an inconsistency, an incongruity between the energies and containers to tell us something's wrong, we got to fix this Tzimtzum. So you can look at it that way, and that's why it says it's Seisur al Manas Livnis. Shviras HaKelim, the shattering, is in order to build. So sometimes you raise a building with a Z in order to build a better building in its place. And when you look at the raising of the building, you say, what are you doing? Why are you knocking down a building? You're not knocking it down. It's part of the building, the next building. You have to knock it down to build a better building. So Tohu is this protest in Seder Ishtalshalos, this market correction that says we need to correct something. Because the Tzimtzum has created a imbalance. And that in turn leads to Seisam L'Sakin, the tikkun of Elam HaTikkun. So it's not that God created an imbalance, he created by the Tzimtzum Arishon, inevitably there's an imbalance. And that's the reason for that. You could ask the same question, why did he do that? Because that's the purpose of existence. To have a dira b'tachtenim, you need tachtenim. Tachtenim means, like the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 36, tachtenim in the Gilead and Sof, that they don't sense the divine. So you need the tzimtzum in order for us to relate to that. Obviously, God can do anything called yachol, but He wanted to make sense in a way that makes sense according to the seichel, the way He created it. Therefore, the tzimtzum creates that imbalance. The Shviras HaKelim exposes it, and tikkun is the repair. So when we look at a world and we say everything is going well, you can convince yourself we're in Golus and everything's going well. So we're reminded, no, from time to time we're reminded here's a break, here's a shatter, here's a fragment, and things are not. It's a reminder that we have to do something. So it's almost like pain, a wake-up call telling you that we have to correct something. So that's the take on explaining Tohu in that context. I'm sure there are other explanations, and again, I invite and welcome meaningfullife.com/mylife, and you have all the resources there, both downloading MP3s, as well as the archives, as well as a forum to ask all the questions and comments and feedback. And now the moment. I just want to preface by saying it's extremely empowering and extremely gratifying to see, firstly, the many essays written, excellent essays, the effort invested. So I commend everyone. To my point of view, you're all winners, because you did the most important thing, which is taking Chassidus, learning an inyan, trying to applying it. So obviously in Elam Hazard there's an inyan of there's winners, and that's an incentive, and Salpitera as well, to give rewards and to be kinasaf from Tarba Chochmah. But from my point of view, and I think the accomplishment is getting so many people motivated. And halavai, every person on earth, I told someone this morning, if 7 billion people on earth would all write an essay that applies Chassidus to their lives, is that not Geula? That's what means so hopefully we'll get there. Meanwhile, it's still not on those numbers, but I also want to thank Rabbi Yisrael Baron, who's the director of the MyLife Chassidus Applied, his diligent work, the organization. making it all happen. You can imagine there's a lot more work than you imagine behind the scenes. And of course, Gani Goodman, our Director of Operations. And I want to thank all the judges, too many to mention here. They're all online mentioned, and all the effort they made. And it's been a great honor. And now, with that, let us go to the actual countdown. So what happened was, after all the hundreds of essays that were submitted, there was a first round of marking, which is to filter and get it down to finalists, and we got it down to 30 finalists. It's actually 29 because one person withdrew. So I'm going to count down from 29. I'll give the name of the person, their age, their title, and where they're from. And with that, we begin. So we begin with the number 29 is Gail Levin. The title of the essay is The Heart of the Matter. From the Waynick Group, a psychiatrist, New Haven, Connecticut, age 60. Number 28, Noah Batmiri, titled essay, Why Am I Here? Committing to Your Purpose in a World of Cheap Substitutes. Milford, Connecticut, age 27. Number 27, as I said, counting down, David Lichtenstatter, Entertainment, and the title is Entertainment, A Body, Soul Balance. Brooklyn, New York, age 30. Next, 26, Rafi, I apologize for the pronunciation, Shemel or Chemel, Chemel. The title, The Dynamics of Happiness, Aholote Rizal, Toronto, Ontario, age 20. Next, number 25, Rivka Shanowitz, How to Kick a Bad Habit to the Curb for Good and Replace it with a Better One. Chumash teacher in Beis Rivka and communications director in Chabad of Westmount, Montreal, Canada, age 23. 24, meaning counting down, essay 24, Mushke Silverberg, titled Wanting Desire, Inspiring Motivation for the Everyday Jobs. Rabbi Y. Rosenfeld Seminary, Chaim Mushke, dorm counselor, Lincolnwood, Illinois, and age 20. I'll make sure I got that right. Actually, that may be the description of the previous one. Here it seems to be Yeshiva Boys School of Pittsburgh, Peabody, Massachusetts, age 16. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm confusing things. It's the way I read it. So let's go now to number 23. Menachem Mendel Schusterman, Overcoming Anxiety. This seems to be Peabody, Massachusetts, age 16. Sorry about that. Next, 22. Rachel Cohen, Loving Me Means Loving You. Leeds, England, age 20. Next, 21. Bensi Afton, To Find Meaning, One Must Make Meaning. Lubavitcher Center Creative Director, I don't even know how to pronounce the city, Bala Chinwat, Pennsylvania, age 30. The next, Yossi Grosbaum, All Fun and No Joy, The Paradox of Life in the Postmodern Era. Shliach Chabad of Folsom, California, age 37. He was actually, I believe, the second prize winner in the first year's contest. 19, counting down, Shneur Zalman Ives, The Olympic Theory. Brooklyn, New York, and his age is 26. Next, number 18, Malki Beton, Adjusting to Distressing New Normals. Shlucha teacher, Vancouver, Canada, age 36. The next one is a Hebrew one. Yisrael Yitzchaki, The Essential Light Found in the Darkness of Addiction. That's translated from the Hebrew. Kfar Chabad, Israel, age 28. The next one is as well a Hebrew one. Amichai Evan Yisrael, Iskafi as a vessel for self-control and fighting addiction. Merker Steinsaltz, Menahel of the project manager, Yerushalayim, Israel, age 36. Number 15. We're down to the last 15 now, the top 15. Mendy Levitin, The Present, Greatest Gift of All. Aholoteda, Seattle, Washington, age 20. Another Hebrew one, Menachem Mendel Wolf, Self-Respect Building. Mashpia B'Yeshivas Temchet Timim Lubavitch in Netanya, the Northern Netanya, age 29. Next, another Hebrew one. Chaim Luria, 13, essay 13. The Revolution of Das. La'avid mida b'li la'avid es hadas. The revolution of the information revolution, how to digest information without losing your mind, basically. A sefer, a meira, a scribe, and a shliach in Zhytomyr, Ukraine, age 32. Number 12, Tani Shmukler, Dealing with Hate Issues. Beis Chaya Mushka Seminary, Montreal, Quebec, age 29. Number 11, Avremi Weinberg, God and Pain, How to Be Vulnerable and Trust Again. Teacher at YOEC, Los Angeles, California, age 32. Okay, now friends, we're now down to the last 10, the top 10 essays. And we're going to go from 10 down to 1. Dov Ber Erechman, a Hebrew essay, The Chassidic Approach to Recovery, Lud, Mekos Lud, in Israel, age 25. Number 9, Avi Lowell, You Are Here, Chassidus and PTSD. Jerusalem, select one, Israel, age 43. Number 8, Esther Rachel El-Kaim, a shidduch as illuminated by the teachings of Chassidus. Bal Harbor, Florida, age 30. And now down to the last 7. Number 7, Chani Maleki, The Evolution of Purpose. Brooklyn, New York, age 38. Number 6, Avrami Karp, The Chassidic Approach to Dealing with PTSD. Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, a student from Spring Valley, New York, age 21. Number 5, Daniel Feld, Humble and Grateful, A Chassidic Path to Happiness. Acupuncturist, Jerusalem, Israel, age 28. Also extracurricular director in Beth Rivka High School. Next, number 4, Sarah Blau, ADD, The Key to Productive Living. So it's an acronym, ADD. The Key to Productive Living, Brooklyn, New York, age 24. And now the top 3. As you know, the top 3 are actually number 4 and 3 have been tied, so they will both get the $1,000 prize. 4, so Sarah Blau is in that category. It's like equal to 3, but it's 4 to 3. The top 3 goes Hadassah Silberstein, How to Deal with Difficult People, Brooklyn, New York, age 24. And now the runner-up, which gets a $3,600 prize, Shraga Krumby, Chassidus as a Psychological Approach. It's a Hebrew essay. And he is in New Jersey. He is a Shliach Beis Chabad in the University of Rutgers, Edison, New Jersey, age 36. And here's the number 1 winner for this year's 2017 Tafshin Zion MyLife Chassidus Applied Essay winner, the 10,000 first prize, Moshe Sheikhoff. Trees and Maps, How to Stop Being a People Pleaser. Miami-Dade College, Miami, Florida, age 27. So there you have it, my friends. This year is the 3rd annual contest, and I congratulate everyone, all the writers, and especially the winners. But as I said, everybody's a winner. But in Elam Haza, someone has to be the first, and someone the second and third. But these were excellent essays. I've already summarized some of them in my own mind, but I will discuss them in the coming episodes. Really interesting, some of them very groundbreaking material, which will all be published. And of course, the winners will get all the details about getting the prizes and further announcements. Stay tuned. So it's been an honor to be able to read it. I feel excited about it. I feel empowered. And with that, we conclude this week's episode of MyLife Essays Applied, 157. Every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. We will have next week will be a pre-Pesach episode, which will be the night of Erev Pesach, which will be the next Sunday. And then after that will be Chol HaMoed, so we will not have an episode. Chol HaMoed actually going to Yontif. But then it will continue as shall be announced. So everyone have a kosher and freilich and Pesach. Congratulations to these winners. It's a great gift to the Rebbe. Yud Alef Nisan, what greater gift to bring all these thousands and thousands and thousands of words that have been written, close to 1 million words, literally books, volumes, all taking Chassidus and applying it to our lives. This is our gift, And with this alone should be the schus to be zeicha that the Rebbe and the Eibishter should have rachmanas on us. We should really be zeicha before Yud Alef Nisan. Ben Nisan nigalu, ben Nisan asidin le'igal, to the Gula Amitis V'Ashlema. Everyone be well and have a blessed week.